Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. Glad you're with us. We are talking about the January 6th hearings. We really haven't done a deep dive into those throughout this whole process, and that's pretty much what we're doing tonight. We're playing some clips. We have as our guest Dr. John Weil, political science professor at MTSU. We played Liz Cheney, the co-chair's opening statements in the first part of the show. I now want to play about a 3.5-minute segment from some of the participants. These are people who testified before the committee on Tuesday, yesterday, and they participated in this on January 6th. So let's hear from them.
Mr. Ayers, why did you decide to come to Washington on January 6th?
For me personally, I was, pretty hardcore into the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I followed, President Trump, on all of the websites, he basically put out, come to Stop the Steal rally, and I felt like I needed to be down here.
So you basically learned about the rally on social media and at some point made a decision to come to Washington.
Yeah. I had some friends I found out were coming down, and I just hopped on with them right at the tail end when I found out, and came down here with them.
Thank you very much. The chair recognized.
Worked up, and so were most of the people there.
So as you started marching, did you think there was still a chance the election would be overturned?
Yeah, at that time I did, because everybody was kind of like in the hope that, Vice President Pence was not going to certify the election. Also the whole time on our way down there, I kept hearing about this big reveal I remember us talking about, and we kind of thought maybe that was it. So that hope was there.
Did you think that the president would be marching with you?
Yeah, I think everybody thought he was going to be coming down. He said in his speech, kind of like he's going to be there with us. So, I think I believed it.
I understand. We know that you illegally entered the Capitol that afternoon and then left the Capitol area later on. What made you decide to leave? Basically, when President Trump put his tweet out, we literally left right after that come out. To me, if he would have done that earlier in the day, 1:30, we wouldn't be in this, maybe we wouldn't be in this bad of a situation or something. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I think we've gotten exceedingly lucky that more bloodshed did not happen because the potential has been there from the start. And we got very lucky that the loss of life was, and as tragic as it is, that we saw on January 6th, the potential was so much more. Again, all we have to look at is the iconic images of that day with the gallows set up for Mike Pence, for the Vice President of the United States. And I do fear for this next election cycle, because who knows what that might bring. If a president that's willing to try to instill and encourage to whip up a civil war amongst his followers using lies and deceit and snake oil, and regardless of the human impact, what else is he going to do if he gets elected again? All bets are off at that point. And that's a scary notion. I have 3 daughters. I have a granddaughter. And I fear for the world that they will inherit if we do not start holding these people to account.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Van Tatenhoff. Mr. Ayers.
So there you hear from a couple of the participants on January 6th, the last one saying, I do fear for this next election cycle. As a political scientist, you follow history, all of that. Do you fear for the next election cycle? What are your thoughts?
Well, of course, a lot depends on who's president at the time. If if Biden is president, I think it's a lot more likely that he would accept the outcome, whatever it is. You know, if Al Gore were president, you know, one of the most noble things that I think has come out of Tennessee and U.S. history was in 2000 when Al Gore said, you know, I still think I won. I know I had more popular votes, but the Supreme Court says the vote count has to stop in Florida, and those votes are going to go to my opponent. I wish him well.
And that, when it was a question of does Pence have that power, it made sense to look back at that moment, that election, because Al Gore in that election was the vice president. He was presiding over it and could have theoretically, under what Trump was saying, could have said, nope, stop it, I declare this or that, and he didn't do that.
We had a similar situation in 1961. Richard Nixon was vice president. He was the one who had to open the ballots in the Senate and announce that John F. Kennedy was the new president. You know, what happened in this election really is unprecedented. You know, the election of 1801 marked the first successful transfer of power from one political party to another in world history. And we continued that up through the last election, and I can say ultimately including the last election. But, you know, one purpose of this hearing is to ascertain, do we need to clarify the laws? I think they're absolutely clear, but, you know, lest there be any doubt about it, maybe we need something that says explicitly the role of the vice president is a ministerial role only. It's not a discretionary duty. He doesn't have the right to cast. And imagine the implications of it. The vice president of the United States determining who the next president is going to be. Why would he decide this? It's ridiculous.
Now, there has been a lot of criticism. There are people that are ignoring the hearings. They say they're not legitimate. They say this or that. Is this, do you think they're having an impact? And what about the people, Republicans? There's some, I guess, news organizations that are just saying they're not covering them. What about all that?
Well, as you and I had discussed earlier, we don't have to persuade everybody in the United States, you know, and I'm not sure that everything that comes out of the hearings is going to be absolutely accurate. I think we need to, you know, exercise our judgment as we watch. But I think what we need is we need enough of the public to pay attention to not be hoodwinked again. And, you know, in Watergate, probably there were more people watching then because sometimes it was in prime time. But, you know, if enough of the informed public will pay attention, I think we have the chance of avoiding future catastrophes.
Do you think that is happening with this hearing?
I think so. I mean, it certainly seems to be eroding Trump's support. Now, at the same time, Biden's support isn't particularly high for a lot of reasons, but none, as far as I can tell, connected with possible criminal wrongdoing. So yes, I think they're having an impact. Are they going to persuade everybody? No. You know, somebody puts their hands in their ears and refuses to watch. I don't know how they can be persuaded. But again, it's majority rule. I think enough people are paying attention that the hearings are, in fact, going to have an impact.
And like you were saying, you don't need to, if it's a 50-50 country, not all 50% have to agree. They're really trying to get it 5 or 10%, and that would be enough to sway things. But it leaves the country in a precarious position when that large a percentage of people can't agree on some facts like this.
Yeah, you know, I think it was Senator Moynihan used to say that everybody's entitled to their own opinion and they're not entitled to but you're not entitled to your own facts. And I think, you know, I'll give a plug to the major networks, but there was a certain solace at a time where most people watch NBC, ABC, or CBS, and we had, you know, roughly the same view of things. And now we're in so many different silos that is, and you know, and racially and religiously and in a lot of other ways, we're often very segregated. We tend to talk to people who are like us and think like us and make the same amount of money as we do, and we're probably weaker because of it.
And there are people that are saying they're worried about the future. I mean, that word civil war was thrown out there, and maybe it's different than the kind of civil war we had before, obviously, but we are so divided. And you, as a political scientist, does it get better or does it get worse? Where do you think we're headed in the next 5, 10, 20 years?
You know, no one knows. I mean, politically, we are as polarized as we were, or about like we were at the time of the Civil War. Fortunately, you know, people talk about red states and blue states, but the truth is many states that are identified as one or the other, maybe 55-45, they're closely divided within themselves. And there's some geographical division, but not, you know, it's not north, south, east versus west. And so I don't think we're facing civil war. I'm more concerned about, you know, just the general distrust that seems to be accompanying government. And, you know, our founders were distrustful of power. That's why we divided it. That's why we have checks and balances. And, you know, maybe the most positive thing to say is that these hearings are a great example of checks and balances. If we've gone off the rails, there's a chance to show the people what's happened and try to get us back on track.
I want to take a call before we go to break. I want to go to Jane, who has called in. Hello, Jane.
Hey, y'all. I've got a couple of comments here, if you could bear with me. You know, this whole Civil War stuff, it's just like the Church of Charlie Manson has resurrected itself. It reminds me of 1969 and the crazy that was going along then. You know, sitting there watching Cheney, her stone cold face, she's got that stone cold look that her dad has. You know, when she started talking about Trump being a 77-year-old man and not an impressionable child, I thought she was going to laugh, but she kept that stone cold face, because I laughed my butt off, because that is what he's supposed to be. He is the president, isn't he? And when I look at those people up on the Capitol trying to overthrow something, they don't realize that the French have never really had their true revolution, and neither did the Russians. And for us, we really didn't have 180 degrees change in this country. So you got to be careful about how being led on into a trap, and you think you're part of the victory, and you end up becoming not just a bait, but everybody else's cat food to be passed around. And I want to say something about these guys. You know, a lot of these guys, these fragile boys and stuff that are joining these so-called frat kind of organizations that do stuff like this, you know, in nature, it's the female sex that picks their mates. You know, if we're going to go back to the year 300 AD, think about this, guys. Okay, just really think about this.
All right.
You're up there doing that kind of stuff, and people are watching, and the far right is given the definition of sexuality. I think by the definition of sexuality by the far right, that a lot of women became lesbians that day. And on that, I'm going to hang up.
So, okay. Good grief. All right, there's
not a sociologist, so I'm going to beg off on that one, okay?
I'm just going to throw it to you. What do you think there, Doc? No, we'll take a break. All right, thanks very much, Jane. We'll take a break. Come back. If you want to call in, there was the number. We'll talk to you. Take a break. Be back right after this.